The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Each year, PolitiFact announces their Lie of the Year, and they have been documenting throughout 2015 Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's statements on their Truthometer. 76% of Trump's statements have come in at mostly false, false, or pants on fire. No other politician has had as many statements rated so far down in the truthfulness rankings, and that makes Donald Trump's 2015 lies the PolitiFact Lie of the Year. But before we get into the specifics, let's look at a list of past lies of the year from PolitiFact, starting in 2009, when Sarah Palin said, and I think we have this, we have a list here for people to take a look at. In 2009, Sarah Palin said that the Affordable Care Act would lead to government death panels that dictated which types of patients would receive treatment. In 2010, the lie of the year was some opponents of Obamacare saying it is a government takeover of healthcare. That was not true. In 2011, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee said that a 2011 budget proposal by Congressman Paul Ryan meant that, quote, Republicans voted to end Medicare, which of course wasn't true. In 2012, Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney said President Obama sold Chrysler to Italians who are going to build Jeeps in China. That wasn't true. In 2013, President Barack Obama's promise that if you like your health care plan, you can keep it was the lie of the year. Millions of people were not able to keep their health care plans because they did not meet the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. And last year, 2014, 16 separate statements made by various commentators and politicians about the Ebola virus being easy to catch, that illegal immigrants were carrying it over the Mexican border, etc., etc. Not true. So that was past lies of the year. Let's look now at some examples of the lies of the year for 2015 from Donald Trump, the first being a pretty recent one. I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down, and I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering. That video does not exist, and we have no reason to believe that Trump was telling the truth there. Next lie from Donald Trump: the Mexican government, they send the bad ones over. Of course, there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Mexico is encouraging criminals to cross the border or anything like that. Yet another lie from Donald Trump. Next lie of the year from Donald Trump: whites killed by whites, 16%. Whites killed by blacks, 81%. That was an infamous retweet from Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Of course, not true. White people and black people killed basically evenly by people of their own race. And as we know, Lewis, people tend to primarily associate with those of the same race that they are, and this leads to a high level of intra-race violence. Continuing with Trump's lies of the year: if you're from Syria and you're a Christian, you cannot come into this country, and they're the ones that are being decimated. If you are Islamic, it's hard to believe you can come in so easily. In fact, it's one of our main groups of people that are coming in. Of course, this is wrong. There is absolutely no U.S. law or regulation that discriminates against Christian refugees or anything of the sort. And then an economic lie from Donald Trump saying the last quarter, it was just announced, our gross domestic product was below zero. Whoever heard of this? It's never below zero. A two-part lie there, Lewis. On the one hand, the domestic product was not zero. And on the other hand, the domestic product has been below zero 42 times over 68 years. And then the last one of Donald Trump's lies of the year: the unemployment rate may be as high as 42%. Of course, we've debunked that countless times. This is buying into the labor force participation conspiracies. The highest number we could reasonably sort of assess as the possible top-level unemployment rate, if you include more than just the U3 and bump it up to the U6, is about 14%. So Trump is a pro at this stuff, right? We talked about his truthful hyperbole on a previous show, Lewis. He does a very good job at using simple language and appealing to low information voters, and it's garnered him a steady 30-ish% support among Republican voters, but no shortage of lies, and PolitiFact calling them the lies of the year.
Yeah, it's the great collection of stuff from Trump. The way he plainly speaks, it appeals to people, and it really works for any candidate. It's not just him, and it's not just his base.
Well, I think it's because he just doesn't really care. I don't even know that he believes a lot of this stuff, but
Right.
he's willing to make this into a really big show, and he's getting some of the benefit of it. You very quickly can build support, but I think we are increasingly seeing, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, that Trump's ceiling has been reached very, very quickly.
Yeah, and we're still not sure if this is all one big joke, but the lies are real. And thank you to PolitiFact, I guess, for bringing it to our attention.
And for those saying PolitiFact lies of the year are always from Republicans, as I told you in that first list we looked at, absolutely not the case. More bizarre behavior statements from Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. He gave a speech yesterday attacking Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former New York Senator Hillary Clinton. And it got uglier than usual. This is so weird. We have the footage. Trump said that Hillary got schlonged. And Lewis, as you know, this is schlong is a slang term for a penis. And just very, very strange, really just getting ugly. Let's take a look at the video of Trump here.
It's been involved and Hillary has been losses. You take a look. Even a race to Obama. She was going to beat Obama. I don't know who'd be worse. I don't know. How does it get worse? But she was going to beat, she was favored to win, and she got schlonged. She lost. I mean, she lost. But I watched her the other night. It was hard. It was really hard, because there were a lot of other things on better, including reading books and reading financial papers, which I actually enjoy reading. But I watched her the other night, and I said, this is not a president.
Right. And of course, when we see Trump, the first thing we think of is president. Trump also went on to say that it was disgusting when Hillary Clinton went to the bathroom during the debate. He might as well just go all the way and say Hillary has cooties and is the teacher's pet. I mean, that's the level we're operating at here.
Yeah, it's kind of childish. When you got to go, right? But this is what people like. It's part of this whole entertainment thing.
It reminds me of when Trump said Megyn Kelly had blood coming out of her whatever, right? Saying Hillary got schlonged is reminiscent of that.
It is, yeah. It's part of his charm. And I don't think he really needs to trash Hillary. Right. Maybe it helps him. I don't know. It just seems like a strange tactic.
My real confusion is how anybody goes to these Trump rallies and sits through this stuff, because the majority of a Trump rally is he reads polls. He takes polls out and he just reads through poll results. That's the first part. That's how he opens these things. Then he brings black people on stage. Like at a recent Las Vegas rally, he's like, oh, here's black people that like me. And he just displayed 4 black people on stage. I mean, it was completely nuts. Then he insults other candidates. And then when a fight breaks out, he narrates the fight. He does almost like a boxing commentary. That is a Trump event. Okay,
but I think you'll probably agree with me when I say this. You'd probably rather go to a Trump event than a Clinton event.
Maybe that's fair. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. But from a media analysis perspective, not because I'm interested in the guy.
Dave, you would just have a better time. Forget the analysis, forget the politics. It would be more fun.
Good thing I'm white Hispanic, or I might really be in trouble if I went to one of these Trump rallies, that's for sure. Speaking of which, the corporate media is totally silent as a Trump supporter is arrested stockpiling bombs specifically to kill Muslims. I'm talking, of course, of a neighborhood in Richmond, California, which is very close to San Francisco. The neighborhood had to be evacuated when police say that 55-year-old white American man, William Celli, was making bombs in his home with the intent of using them to harm the Muslim community. Police got a tip from a caller on December 17th who said, listen, this guy, William Celli, is making devices and threatening to harm Muslims. For whatever reason, it took police 3 days to actually follow up about it. Police removed a device from the home in the 5100 block of McBride Avenue, and the Walnut Creek bomb squad detonated a device before neighbors were allowed to return to their homes. Celli was naturally arrested. Now here's where it gets interesting. Richmond police are not elaborating on the threats other than to say that Celli's actions and statements drew the attention of law enforcement and were concerning to others. We have some of that elaboration, though, Lewis. Number one, Celli appears to be a very ardent supporter, fervent, we could even say, of presidential candidate Donald Trump, a post on his Facebook page said he would follow Trump, quote, to the end of the world. I mean, I don't know if that's a fervent support or mental illness. Quote from this man's Facebook page: Donald Trump's on again. I'm happy. Leader's okay, but this guy's a great point man. I'll follow this man to the end of the world. Maybe this guy wants the end of the world to come sooner than later, and that's what he meant. I don't know. He's also used his Facebook account to complain about Syrian refugees, Democrats, and Republicans who just aren't conservative enough, like Donald Trump, although that's not William Celli's complaint. He seems completely unaffected by the fact that many of Trump's ideas are indistinguishable from Bernie Sanders, as we talked about yesterday. He's a self-employed plumber. He complained that he lost work to undocumented immigrants who he believes came to the U.S. to collect welfare benefits. I love this, Lewis. These immigrants who are so lazy, they're lazy and they come here and they steal our jobs. Well, if they're crossing borders to work not the best jobs in languages that aren't their first language, isn't that very industrious? What's lazy about that, Lewis? I will never understand this stupid double standard. The lazy immigrants come to a new country and take jobs and work. That's so lazy of them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other examples of this type of hypocrisy that we've heard from politicians and pundits and all of that. But,
Yeah.
It all kind of blends together. But, it's all the same.
Are they lazy or are they unemployed and collecting welfare benefits? Or is it somehow both?
Like Donald Trump hiring these, I guess you could say, illegals, as he'd call them.
Yeah.
They're building all these giant buildings he's constructing.
Yeah, William Celli should think about that. Right. Some of these undocumented immigrants that are so lazy that they're working are being hired by Donald Trump's contractors to build the buildings that Trump puts his name on. It just doesn't make any sense. And
his Donald Trump hat was probably made in Mexico.
Maybe so, yeah. And according to a tally from the New America Foundation, white right-wing extremists were the most dangerous terrorist groups in the United States, despite the fact that people often focus on just 9/11. Not that we shouldn't focus on 9/11. 9/11, hugely tragic and important and influential and impactful. But since 9/11, the majority of domestic terror incidents are being conducted by American-born white dudes. So you should remember that. And corporate media essentially silent on this entire story that a Trump supporter was caught stockpiling bombs specifically to kill Muslims. Not really interesting to corporate media. Alternet wrote about it, Slate, etc. We're covering it, but just not a good corporate media story, apparently.
Well, a lot of the time, if it's a white boy like this, it's usually not a story unless the attack is successful. And then it's a story. It's still a story if it's a radical Islamist.
Yeah, it's not interesting because police were able to do their jobs, and even though it took them 3 days, they did follow up on the call that this guy was stockpiling weapons and posting crazy stuff to Facebook. Because police successfully stopped this guy, no reason to cover it. Let's pretend it was never a risk.
Yeah, well, hey, it's about ratings, so maybe it's not good for ratings. I think it's still important information.
We'll take a break. After the break, Bernie Sanders' campaign has reached a very, very interesting milestone. I will tell you what it is next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is funded directly by viewers and listeners through something we call membership. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. And today's new member of the day is Caleb Hayashi. Caleb, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. And we have officially stopped calendar sales, the 2016 Hatred Mail calendar, which I have here. They are no longer on sale, but we do have a few left. So we've left the sales page up at davidpakman.com/calendar16. 3 people got some of the last 7 or 8 or so that we have here in the studio. If you go to davidpakman.com/calendar16 and the page still allows you to buy a calendar, that means we still have at least one left. And you can grab it if you would like, and you can get one for free with a new membership if you want. You don't have to. You can just sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders recently received the final dollars that he needed to break a really, really interesting milestone when it comes to campaign fundraising. He officially hit 2 million individual campaign contributions. No other U.S. presidential candidate has achieved this at this point in the election. And to contextualize this, President Barack Obama in 2008, historic campaign, bringing in so many new voters, managed to break just 1 million contributions. Bernie Sanders already breaking the 2 million contribution mark. Even more impressive is the contribution average size. As of a few days ago, the average donation to Bernie Sanders was under $30, which means that millions of his supporters are chipping in rather small amounts. And there's sort of two ways to look at this. One way is, well, because it's small amounts, it doesn't matter that you have 2 million subscribers. You're not going to 2 million donors. You're not going to get the money you need. The other side of it is, well, you have so many more people engaged. Everybody gets one vote, and that could really be a big deal. So a very interesting milestone that Bernie Sanders has reached.
I'm very happy for Bernie and his campaign. I think it is more about engagement than about the actual amount of money we're talking about here. Because, well, let's face it, Bernie does not have the connections that Hillary has.
No.
He doesn't have the political action committees. He doesn't have the Koch brothers backing him. So all he needs is votes. And if whatever he's doing is working, good.
Well, the question is, will it matter in the end, right? The good news is record for contributions combined with record attendance at his rallies. This is adding credibility to the idea of Bernie Sanders energizing first-time voters, people under 45 years old, independents in open primary states to maybe show up and vote at 2008 Obama levels, which was quite a victory in and of itself. The bad news is the news you know, right? Bernie Sanders is far behind nationally, and he's behind in many key states. And as we know, the DNC seems to have its hand on the scales for Hillary Clinton. What I'm sure of is that if Bernie Sanders were a sort of establishment-approved candidate, and he reached a donation record, we would be hearing about it on corporate media. Corporate media does not care that Bernie Sanders has reached a record of donations. You would think, wow, corporate media reports on news for the people, right? And, you know, people are donating to Bernie. This is a big story. Nah, corporate media doesn't seem to care about the 2 million donations.
Yeah, and they probably did all cover this, but it's going to be about a 5 to 10 second mention once today, maybe, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they can say they covered it.
Absolutely. And they can get it on the record in maybe 10 seconds or maybe put it on their online blog or something like that. And hey, it's corporate media. They're covering it. We cannot rely on corporate media anymore. And that's why it's so important that we have strong independent media. If it's ever been more clear than now, I don't know when. A conservative broadcaster who once threatened to shoot Hillary Clinton in the vagina was arrested on a weapons charge in Ohio. This guy looks calm in this picture. After he was mistaken for a suspect on the terrorist watch list, Pete Santilli was stopped Friday afternoon in Newtown, Ohio, after police spotted him driving slowly, 20 miles per hour, in a 50 mile per hour zone, and suspected him of texting while driving, according to the Cincinnati Enquirer. Officers stopped him, detained him, and a woman riding in his SUV. One of their names was on the National Terror Watch List, but police determined after about 45 minutes that the names were similar, but not actually the same names. Police did find a 9mm Smith & Wesson in a bag between the passenger's feet while searching the vehicle. Here's the interesting thing. Secret Service investigated this guy, Santilli, in 2013 after he said he wanted to shoot Hillary Clinton, quote, right in the vagina for her involvement in, who even cares, some conspiracy theories, doesn't even matter. The 50-year-old Santilli was charged with illegally carrying a concealed weapon without a permit. He regularly hosts militia leaders and other right-wing extremists on his program called Off the Hook in the Morning. I'm actually, it turns out he was on the terror watch. He wasn't really on the terror watch list, right? It was a similar name. If you regularly interview militia people and make threats about shooting a politician and have guns, doesn't that warrant being on the terror watch list? I mean, if not this guy, then who is my question.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of shows hosted by nuts, having nuts on all the time. And when someone says they want to shoot Hillary in the vagina,
yeah,
I think it's usually taken pretty lightly because
Really?
it's just kind of absurd. I mean, it sounds like satire.
Right. Nobody would really shoot her there. They'd shoot her in the chest if they really wanted to kill her. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't think she's going to be having any more children. I mean, I don't know. Bad joke, but you take this lightly because this is someone who is a radio host. He's a shock jock, if you will. The whole point is to say crazy things. Just some confusion from law enforcement.
He's convinced that it was no accident. He doesn't believe the story about, oh, there's someone with a similar name, but it's not you. He thinks that it was for political reasons, that his name actually was on the terror watch list. But that's such a weird argument because if your name really was on the terror watch list, be it because of political conspiracy or by accident, then there should be repercussions to that. The police looked into it and said, oh, it's not actually you. So the theory is bogus because if you're going to be put on that list for political reasons, at some point, something would be done as a result, as opposed to just pulling you over because you're going 30 miles per hour under the speed limit and then saying, oh, it wasn't actually you on the list.
Yeah. But are people put on that list for political reasons? I mean, wasn't Ted Kennedy put on a no-fly list or some type of watch list?
I thought that was just an accident. That was the no-fly list. And remember, the no-fly list and the terror watch list, two separate lists. People think they're the same. They're not. Both of them can be bogus in some cases. That's what they share in common, but two separate lists. And I think it's safe to say, Louis, you're not on either.
Not that I know of, but all that talk about me accidentally bringing that big knife on a plane,
Yeah.
Who knows if someone watches the wrong clip.
Okay, it is Christmas week, Louis. Do you celebrate Christmas?
Do I celebrate Christmas? It depends. In what sense?
This wasn't meant to be a difficult question.
I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay, will you be doing anything in particular on Christmas?
Am I celebrating Christmas by having the day off?
No, that's not. I mean, that's just because the federal government has established Christianity as a religion.
Okay. Well, what if I sing carols to myself at home?
That would absolutely be a celebration. I'll be celebrating it will be Jewish Christmas. I will be having Chinese food. And I already know exactly where I'm going to be ordering it from. I'm going to be in Western Massachusetts for the weekend. I really like a good Christmas carol. And yesterday we played one for you. And we're going to play another one today. Greg Stevens produced these. They are for the Satanic Temple. And you can easily find all of these satanic Christmas carols if you go on YouTube and you just Google Satanic Temple Christmas carols. You'll find all of them. Today, we are playing one called Blessings of Knowledge and Fruit. Not the types of blessings that maybe good Christians are into, but a different type of blessing. To play us out today, I love that, Louis, to play us out into break, Blessings of Knowledge and Fruit.
Got you, ladies and gentlemen, let no one here deny. He banned you from your own backyard and left you out to die. All because your savior thought it right to vilify my blessings of knowledge and fruit. Knowledge and fruit. My blessings of knowledge and fruit.
Love it.
You ladies and gentlemen, and blamed it all on you. I can't believe the harsh confinement you were subject to. Your only sin was wanting to expand your point of view with my blessings of knowledge and fruit. Knowledge and fruit. All my blessings of knowledge and fruit. God screwed you, ladies and gentlemen. Your joy was not his aim. And yet you're still down on your knees and belting out his name. As he's whipped and weakened you, it seems you learned to shame my blessings of knowledge and fruit. Knowledge and fruit. My blessings of knowledge and fruit. Skip it about the top. God screwed you, ladies and gentlemen, but I will love you yet. I will not coerce you by commandment or by threat.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Anthony Ingraffea, the Dwight C. Baum Professor of Engineering Emeritus at Cornell University. He has worked as a structural engineer, a county engineer. He has taught structural mechanics and fracture mechanics. You've been at the center of what has become a sort of controversial study about fracking, about methane gas, and I want to get into the details of that. But let's start, before getting into that, talk to us generally a little bit about what the risks are environmentally, in terms of health, etc., with fracking, or as it's known to some, hydraulic fracturing. What do we need to be aware of?
The most important aspects of impact to human health and the environment from what people call fracking, which is really extraction of oil and gas from shale formations. That's really the news of the last decade. Fracking's been around a long time, but fracking and shale is what's new. And because fracking and shale is inherently inefficient, that is, they don't get very much oil and gas out of a shale gas well, compared to traditional wells, they have to drill many, many wells in a given area. Thousands of wells in the county, tens of thousands of wells in the state, hundreds of thousands of new wells across the country. Every time you drill additional wells, you run the risks of there being spills, contamination incidents, blowouts, increased truck traffic, increased waste disposal issues like we're seeing now in Oklahoma and Texas, Arkansas, Ohio. And most importantly for everybody on the planet, you drastically increase emissions of methane and carbon dioxide, both of which are the things that are driving climate change.
When we hear pro-fracking people, and I hesitate to call them experts or analysts because I often don't see any expertise or analysis coming from some of their statements, we are led to believe that when there are problems with individual fracking sites, that it is not anything inherent to the activity of fracking, but rather we hear, oh, there was something specifically done wrong with a particular well and it leaked, for example. And the pro-fracking community sort of wants to explain to us that, broadly speaking, fracking is very, very safe, but we can find individual instances where someone did something wrong, for example. What's your reaction to that line of thinking, that fracking generally is actually safe, but it's individual errors with a particular fracking site that pose the risk? Does that make any sense to you?
No, it doesn't. It's a statistical gobbledygook, as I said, because you have to drill many, many wells to get economically viable amounts of oil or gas out of a shale formation. You statistically increase the probability of all these individual incidents occurring. Of course, every accident is an individual incident. The question is, what is the frequency with which those incidents occur? And if the industry is always operating more or less at the same level of safety or non-safety, but you multiply that level by a larger number of wells in the given area, obviously the number of individual incidents is going to increase. That's the problem with shale. Everything is bigger, longer, takes more time. And because everything is bigger, longer, and takes more time, the probability of something going wrong goes up. That's the problem.
And this sort of gets me into the next area I want to discuss with you, which comes from the study you were involved in that I mentioned. We would like to think that, okay, we do more wells, more sites, etc. But each one, as technology improves, proves to be less and less of a risk. But your study found that the exact opposite is true. In other words, you found that the newer oil and gas wells that use the more modern hydraulic fracturing technology actually are more likely to be leaking methane. Why is that, in your opinion?
We found that to be true in the state of Pennsylvania. And let me just point out that modern technology is modern technology. The technology of drilling a well, casing a well, cementing a well, and fracking a well is not new technology. The industry has been doing those actions more or less the same way for decades. So any notion that there is constantly improving technology which increases or decreases the likelihood of something going wrong is just false. What is more important in the rate at which there is a well failure, a loss of integrity, a leaking incident, is the actual actions taken by operators supposedly to try to follow regulations. When they make shortcuts, either because the price of gas is very high and the price of oil is very high, so they want to drill as many wells and get them online as fast as possible, meaning you're taking shortcuts, you're using less experienced crews, the equipment might not be in great repair. Or at the other end of the spectrum, which we have now, which is the industry isn't the price of gas and oil is so low that nobody can make any money at it. Again, you're going to cut corners. Safety procedures, environmental procedures are going to be not followed as strictly as normally. And so in those two extremes, you're making a lot of money, you're not making very much money. You see an incidence of increased rate of loss of well integrity. That's well known. It's documented in the industry literature itself. It's human nature. The idea is that you want to get as much money out of that hole you're drilling in the ground as you can relative to the amount of money you put down that hole to drill and frack the well.
The study that you were involved with has so shaken up the pro-fracking community that there have actually been articles, which I'm sure you've seen, I was looking through them this morning, that are out there specifically to attempt to debunk the study you were involved in. And one of the criticisms I would love to hear you address is the critics of the study you talk about, as you mentioned, was focused in Pennsylvania. The pro-fracking community claims, well, Anthony Ingraffea is giving us data only from Pennsylvania. And how does he justify that the Pennsylvania data is representative of fracking more broadly? So I'll pose the question to you. Your study did focus on Pennsylvania. Is there any reason to think that the results would be different in non-Pennsylvania locations?
No, not significantly different. We chose Pennsylvania because it is the state where the largest volume of newfound shale gas is being produced from the Marcellus Formation. It's the state which has twice updated its originally tough regulations monitoring oil and gas operations in the state. So we went to a place where the industry prides itself in saying, here's where we're doing the most work under the toughest regulations. And what we found is business as usual. The rate at which new shale gas wells are found to be defective is about the same historically as it's always been in the relatively modern era of oil and gas operations. There's no reason at all to suspect that we have the same operators, more or less, many of the same operators operating in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Ohio, West Virginia, wherever there's shale gas and shale oil operations, using exactly the same procedures, the same protocols, sometimes under weaker regulations. Why would we suspect that there'd be any different action? The only possible difference would be geological. But again, the industry has been drilling through the same geological strata for many, many decades, over 100 years. They know what's down there, more or less, and they know what they're supposed to be doing to build and maintain a well that does not leak. So no, I dismiss a criticism like that as uninformed and nonsense.
The last topic I want to turn to in the time we have left is that of the connection between fracking and earthquakes. And I've been looking at data for several months coming out of Oklahoma, which certainly seems to show at minimum a correlation between an increased frequency of earthquakes in Oklahoma that seems to be happening near and in terms of the timeline, near fracking locations. What research have you done into this possible connection, and are you ready to say anything about whether there's a causal relationship there?
Well, it's not important what I say. What's important is what the state of Oklahoma now admits. Oklahoma originally resisted. When I say Oklahoma, the governor, various officials in the state originally, a few years ago, resisted even the correlation between increased human-induced seismicity and waste injection from fracking operations. I want to make that clear. It's not fracking per se. It's the injection of fluid waste from fracking into so-called disposal wells that is now acknowledged by every official of any importance, including the governor of the state of Oklahoma, that there is not only a correlation, there's causality. So much so that the state of Oklahoma has issued directives to a number of operators to cease and desist from operations of a number of injection wells and to do better monitoring and reporting of the pressure used and the volume injected in many other wells. So Oklahoma has come a long way to try to understand what is increasingly happening, the fear in Oklahoma, is that the upper end, that is the largest magnitude of induced seismicity in Oklahoma so far has been about a 5.7. There have been many in the high 4s, low 5s of additional induced seismic events. The fear is that at some point there'll be triggering of an even larger event. 5.7 is bad enough. That's going to cause some significant surface damage to structures and possibly injury to humans. It's certainly causing loss of property values, the need for property owners to start getting earthquake insurance in Oklahoma, and the health effects of causing tremendous stress in thousands of Oklahoma residents. In contrast to that, Texas is still in a state of denial.
Incredible, yeah. And as we often see, for-profit capitalism for where the money is being made, but then socializing the costs through insurance, through health effects, et cetera, as you're pointing out.
Exactly.
A grim picture for sure. We've been speaking with Anthony Ingraffea. He is the Dwight C. Baum Professor of Engineering Emeritus at Cornell University. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Thank you, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The U.S. government yesterday overturned its 30-year ban on blood donations by gay men, saying they can now donate 12 months after their last sexual contact with another man. The FDA said its decision to reverse the policy was based on an examination of the latest science, which shows that an indefinite ban is not necessary to prevent transmission of HIV, which ultimately can cause AIDS. The quote from Dr. Peter Marks, Deputy Director of the FDA's Biologics Division, is ultimately the 12-month deferral window is supported by the best available scientific evidence at this point in time relevant to the U.S. population. Some other countries have already done this. The UK, Australia, New Zealand have a 12-month deferment period on donations from gay men. I'm sure that the 12-month deferral actually does make the process safer due to the way HIV spreads, etc. But I received close to a dozen emails over the last 24 hours, Lewis, from gay men saying, more than likely, most gay men won't be able to donate blood because people are in relationships in the same way that straight people are often in relationships. Gay people are also in relationships. So that basically it's only going to apply to a small percentage of gay men. There's no question that this is discriminatory against a monogamous gay couple that is sexually active, even if both people have tested negative for HIV. There's no doubt that the policy is discriminatory, but I want to put up on the screen an interesting email that I received from a gay man who wrote the following to me. Let's take a look at it and then discuss. David, I get that the 12-month deferral window is discriminatory, and I get that we should have equality. I get it. But the prevalence of HIV in sexually active males who have anal sex with other men is through the roof. 4% of the population is reportedly gay men who engage in anal sex, and they make up 54% of all current HIV carriers in the US and 90% of all new HIV infections. Discrimination or not, I have no problem with the medical system saying no to all of that blood. That individual asking to remain anonymous. What do you think, Lewis? This is very, very controversial, and we don't often get we usually get this many emails after we cover a story. We got nearly a dozen emails about this before we even talked about this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, when someone is going to give blood, it's based on the honor system, right? And we discussed that a lot of this blood does not get tested. Is that true? So it's interesting. I mean, I certainly understand that it is discriminatory, but those statistics are accurate. And so, I guess the question would be a risk over reward. Do we need that blood? Is it essential?
My understanding is that there is generally a need for blood, but that there is more need for, I'm forgetting now, I think it's plasma and platelets, or maybe just platelets. I don't remember exactly. And fewer people ever donate those anyway. And that's really the issue. But yes, my understanding is that there is a need for blood.
Well, I'm not sure where I fall. I mean, I suppose, I don't like taking people at their word on anything, but that's how the system works, and that's how it will always work anyway.
You're also taking at their word straight people who say, "Oh, I haven't done intravenous drug, whatever." Right?
I'm talking about everybody.
Yeah.
And so you never really know what you're getting. But I'm all about people being safe, and if this type of discrimination, is it discrimination if health is the primary concern?
Well, I think there's no doubt that it is discrimination, but is it discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, or, as this man who wrote us is saying, is it discrimination based on medical statistics, which happen to correlate in a particular way? I am now opening it up to the audience, and we'll follow up on this. I don't know where the audience is going to fall on this, and I'm curious to hear. Big news from SpaceX and their Falcon 9 rocket. They have done something very, very impressive. Yesterday, they launched a rocket. Let's first take a look at video of the launch itself.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have liftoff of the Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is clearing the tower.
So clearly, the Falcon 9 rocket taking off successfully. The real question is, could it land upright? This is something SpaceX has been working on for a long time. They, numerous times, did not successfully land a rocket, but finally, Lewis, it has happened, and we have video of the SpaceX rocket coming back down and landing upright. Incredible video. Take a look at this.
There it is. Going in. Landing legs should be deployed in about 10 seconds or so. That is a view from the landing pad.
That is that first stage
Coming
coming
down.
back down to land and taking up. History in the making, guys.
Stage 1 is landed. LZ-1, the Falcon is landed. Landing operators moving to procedure 11.100, section 3 on LZ-1 VNet and recovery net. Repeat, the Falcon has landed.
People very, very excited, as you can see there. And as big as this is for SpaceX, it's not the first time that a vertical takeoff rocket has landed upright after launching into space. Jeff Bezos' private spaceflight company, Blue Origin, announced they landed a rocket post-launch. But this is a far more complex rocket. This is a multi-stage rocket. It's designed to go higher and faster. And this is so huge because right now, when we send rockets into space, the rocket part of it that is then boosting some kind of capsule or who knows what, could be anything, is either destroyed or it just breaks, it falls, and it falls back to the ocean and it's no longer usable, etc. This is so
also,
huge.
Occasionally it becomes parts of the rocket will become space debris.
Yes.
And yeah, that is something we'd like to avoid.
Now we can completely change the game on using rockets to get into space, which may not even be the best thing going forward. We're already thinking of other ideas, but the fuel is only 1/80th of the total cost of the Falcon 9, right? So of the $16 million that it costs to fuel and build one of these, only $200,000 is the fuel. So if you can get the rocket back and use parts of it again, you are drastically reducing the cost of each of these launches. And this opens up financially so many new options. So it's hard to overstate the importance of this, other than to say, in the future, we may not use rockets like this at all, but for the time being, we do, and thus this is absolutely huge.
And I would expect nothing less from Elon Musk. And he's working on great things. The Hyperloop is still a possibility, and it seems like everything he touches becomes incredibly successful.
Yes, although recently Tesla, which, full disclosure, I own some shares of, did have a less than ideal reliability survey or something like that. But still, I think long term, a lot of the projects he's involved in now will do very, very well. We have a voicemail number, which is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail I received.
Hello, I'm just calling to congratulate you on your changes to theme music. The music is very nice. And I also enjoyed the Satanic Christmas Carol, which is very funny. And happy holidays to you and yours.
Yeah, most people liking the Satanic Christmas Carol, most people liking the new music for the show, although a couple people wrote to me and said the music is not good, but part of that maybe takes a little while to get used to. The new music on the show is actually from a viewer of ours, Kurt Washington, which is very, very exciting. And I'm glad to have it. And right now we have, we're using it for all of our breaks, but we may eventually mix it up. You know, we're open to ideas, but it's all about changing, Lewis, and expanding and improving and so on and so forth. Most people liking the music. On today's bonus show, we will talk about Bill Cosby suing some of his accusers. We will talk about no indictments coming down in the Sandra Bland case. And we will also talk about Iranian hackers targeting a United States dam. All of those stories and more. DavidPakman.com/membership is where you sign up. And we have just a couple 2016 Patriot Mail calendars left. DavidPakman.com/calendar16. If the page is up, it means we still have a calendar you can buy.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.